Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Beyond Never Again, a 6-week journey exploring a very heavy topic, a very emotional topic, how the Holocaust speaks to us today. Before we begin, I just want to start off with some housekeeping, although I believe that everybody that's here on the Zoom has been at classes before, but I know that there are some people watching the recording, for the benefit of those that may watch it in the future, that have not taken a class before. I just want to go through a little bit about how the class works. For starters, this is a 6-week journey. There are going to be 6 lessons. Each lesson will be 90 minutes each, and each lesson will be given twice. This is the first option. So it's kind of given simultaneously on 2 tracks, either on Zoom at 1 p.m. each Monday, starting today, going for 6 Mondays, and in person at 7:30 p.m. this evening. If you come this evening, you will be treated to a wonderful dinner and an in-person presentation. You do not need to let me know each week which one you intend to attend. That's okay. You can bounce around between the 2 of them. I think we have enough. There's about 35 students, so there's probably enough that each week we'll have a few people on Zoom, but probably most of the crowd will be there in person. One note specific to this course about scheduling. You may have noticed that because of some travel delays on my part, we had to delay the start of this course. So we're starting today and not last week, Monday. As a result, this course is going to go over Rosh Hashanah, meaning we're going to give 4 lessons. The 5th lesson will be the week of Rosh Hashanah, and Rosh Hashanah is Monday night. So that week, I will give the lesson on Sunday night. Does that make sense? Let me give you the exact date like that. If you want to notate it on your calendar, you can. So if we were to do every Monday night, then we would be scheduled to give a class on Monday, September 22nd. And Rosh Hashanah is on September 23rd. So instead of September 22nd, the class will be given on September 21st on Sunday. Again, same schedule, 1 p.m. on Zoom, 7:30 p.m. in person. So that's just notating that, and then we're going to go one class afterwards, which should work with a regular schedule, to give a class on September 29th. All right? So that's just one note.
All right.
A note on timing. I really try to keep the class to exactly 90 minutes. I really try to start talking at the start time, so at 1 o'clock p.m. for the Zoom, 7:30 p.m. for the in-person. You're always welcome to join us a few minutes earlier. On Zoom, I try to open the Zoom a few minutes early. In person, the doors open around 7 o'clock, and dinner is ready, so you can come early, however early you'd like to, before the 7:30 start time. I think I mentioned before we started the official class that there's a textbook intended for each of you. If you have it already, great. I know Ron and Mickey, you have yours. For anybody else, and those that are watching the recording, I know there's some people that are not intending to come live to any classes. I think Wally and Shari were both planning to watch recordings. So I think you should both already have your textbooks. I mailed them out to you. But if there's anybody that doesn't have their textbook yet and would like to get it, please just reach out to me. We'll make up a time. I'm here most of the day. You can stop by. Just give me a little heads up, and I'll be happy to meet you in my office and give you your textbook. For those that are attending in person, obviously, we'll be waiting for them. A word about emails. You should have received an email from me at about 9 o'clock this morning reminding you of this evening's class. If you did, great. That means the emails are working, and that means you will also receive an email each week at about 9 or 10 o'clock a.m. The morning before the class, and that will be your reminder that the class is coming up. You will also receive an email at 9:30 p.m. that evening, so starting from this evening, with a follow-up to the class. Just a brief summary of the lesson that we learned, a link to the video recording, some referrals to articles or books or previous classes that I'll make during the presentation. That will all be linked in that email, and you'll be able to see that. If you're not getting those emails, please let me know. Like if you didn't get the one this morning, let me know. And that means maybe you're not officially registered in the system or whatever it is, and we'll have to get that taken care of. I always say this: the main reason I send those emails, those follow-up emails, is because I like when you hit the reply button. I like when you tell me you disagreed with everything I said. I like when you say you did a fantastic presentation. I like when you say, "Hey Zoshi, great as always." I like when you call me on the phone and scream at me. The feedback is very much appreciated. So you have my email, you have my phone number. Please don't hesitate to reach out. The last thing I want to talk about is lesson format. It's kind of formatted as a little bit of a lecture, but we have texts and readings that kind of back it up, that we explore and that we unpack as we move along. I usually like when people read those texts. I think most of you here either have the textbook or you have the PDF. So you should be able to participate if you're uncomfortable doing so, or if you're in the middle of eating lunch and you have your camera off or whatever it is, no problem. Just wave me along and I'll pick on the next guy. Okay, With that being said, I think we are ready to begin. I want to start today's lesson by having you guys start. I want to ask the question, why are you here? I give a lot of courses on a lot of topics, and to me, this one is very different. For me, it already has been, and I think for you, it will be an emotional journey. I think the Holocaust in and of itself is a very heavy subject. We all grew up, and perhaps those of you that are a little older than I, even more so, but we all grew up with Holocaust survivors all around us. And learning the story as we grew older, we learned more details of what exactly it means. And in more recent history, in the past 2 years, we've had to wrestle with October 7th, making it all the more timely. The reality of these tragedies is heavy, and I think it weighs on every single one of us, I would say at every moment of the day, but perhaps sometimes more consciously, sometimes less consciously. But I'd like to set the tone by recognizing who else is here and why everyone came. Why, like, what inspired you specifically to come to this class? Anybody want to get started? Don't all jump over once. Go ahead, Mark. Essence that it is.
Yes. Earlier this year, I went on March of the Living to Poland, and we saw several concentration camps. But basically, my whole life, I've seen movies or heard things about the Holocaust, and I always wondered, what do why? Well, but so much. What do you do about it? And the only conclusion that I can come to is that you fight. That's it, because I can't explain it any other what to do here.
Okay. I'm curious what that was like. What was it like going on March and living in a post October 7th world? Did you feel a different? Like, I wonder what it would have been like going 5 years ago versus going,
I don't know. I don't know. What the difference was. It was very, emotional and sad and very sucks you into what happened, sort part way. But I can't I don't know what it was like before.
Right.
They didn't talk a lot about October 7th.
October 7th. No, but I mean, in your brain, I'm sure it's there. It's
yeah. It's
right.
in the but they didn't. It wasn't part of the general discussions.
Right. Great, Mickey. You want to go next? Why are you here?
I think that the whole subject of the Holocaust and October 7th certainly, like you say, makes it timely. And the idea of where so many people perish barbarically and needlessly and savagely, but others are spared, others are not. Others made it through those events, and how is it? How does this all fit into the workings of Hashem? And that's something I've always struggled with, and I know that there's various kind of thought about that, but it still really continues to disturb me how to emotionally think about that feels settled. So I think that I thought about this course as something that would kind of continue to help me kind of ponder that in a way that things can better fall into place, so to speak.
Absolutely. I could not agree with you more. I also noticed that you very much avoided the terminology of saying that you hope this course will answer it for you. And I hope that was intentional, because this course is not a course that's really intending to answer any questions. It's really meant to help process and give us a framework. The questions are there. Without this course, there are a lot of courses I've given in the past that maybe there were questions that never occurred to you. Oh, no, it never occurred to me exactly how the Talmud works. And okay, now you're asking the question, and you're going to answer the question, and then I learn about it, and it's great. This is not one of those courses. This is a course, the question is a question that we all grew up with. And the answer is not what this course is intending to present. It's more trying to process, to do it together as a group, if you will. So I like that. I like what you said there. Ron, you want to try to give this a whirl? Why are you here?
to learn. I'm here to learn and accept what's going on right now because I see the same thing occurring that occurred just before the Holocaust occurred,
Right.
that I'm seeing it now. And I've lived with that throughout my life. I thought we were getting better, but then it appears that we're going back that same route. And I want to see how the Holocaust, what you have to say about how to deal with what's going on right now, and help me accept that.
Right. In other words, those that don't learn from history are doomed, right? Are doomed to repeat it.
Exactly.
So how do we take lessons from the right?
And with the information I'm getting, that history is being rewritten from
Right.
what I understand.
Yeah, this touches on. I'll go next because there's a reason why I chose to do this course. Obviously, for those of you that are familiar a little bit with the way that the JLI system works, JLI has lots of courses in a library, and then I get to choose, what I'm giving and what not. Some of them are brand new, and then I'll usually give brand new ones. This one is one that was given 25 years ago, and I pulled it off the archives and said I'd like to give this now. And it ties a little bit on what Ron was saying. It's really because I find one question to reverberate all the time since October 7th in my head. It's not so much why did God allow it to happen. That's also a big question. It's not so much, where was God in the Holocaust, or where was God on October 7th? That's also a question, and we're going to deal with a lot of those things. To me, the main question was, what does it have to do with me? You know what I mean? Like, is the whole answer just never again? And that's why I was really drawn to this course. The title of the course was the question that I was asking. Is really the whole purpose of the Holocaust just so that we can walk around and scream it from the rooftops, never again, never forget, etc.? That's an important thing to do, but why would Hashem, in terms of my personal little life, what is the Holocaust supposed to speak to me about? What is October 7th supposed to change in my life? That's the question I like to ask myself. I'm not sure if that's exactly what you meant, Ron, but I kind of went after you, and I dovetailed off what you said. Okay, Mark Schneider, you want to give us your
Okay.
why are you here?
Am I on? I'm on. Well, throughout our history, this has always been a question. Where is God? Why isn't he here to help us and to rescue us and to give us the rain and everything? It's always been a question, and people would always lose faith and resort to idols, and it throughout all the parshas, and we read about it. And so the question has always been present throughout our history. And I'm now interested in what the Rebbe has to say and what you have to say in regard to this issue, because it's so potent in creating feelings within us all, and we want something to grab and hold on to and understand. And so I'm seeking your assistance in doing this.
Okay. Shari, I know, is here, but she's just listening. I don't know if she's driving or what, but she asked that she doesn't want to read, she doesn't want to participate, but she's listening. So welcome, Shari.
I have to walk the dog, so I don't want to distract, but I am here.
Okay, great. Okay. All right. So we're going to get started. Before we start, obviously, let me take a moment to give you an overview of the different angles that we're going to approach here for this course. And I really want to thank everybody for sharing, because there's no doubt that having those perspectives of each of you while you're here, and it's interesting to me that we have only 6 people on the Zoom, and yet we had 6 different perspectives, each person here for a different reason with a different background. There's no question it'll frame the way I'm going to teach over the next 6 weeks. I appreciate your input. But the general kind of broad stroke topics that we're going to be discussing are, in lesson 1, we're going to try and answer the big question of why, right? Or where was God in the Holocaust? Can we understand human suffering? It's titled Wrestling with God. Lesson 2, which is titled The Voice of Your Brother's Blood Cries Out, is going to talk about how it impacts us as Jews, how the Holocaust impacts us as Jews. In lesson 3, in their death, they were not parted. We're going to talk about the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem, mainly from a halachic perspective, like the halachot of the mitzvah of sanctifying one's name for God, giving up one's life for our religion, which hopefully none of us are ever challenged to do, but obviously which 6 million Jews were, and whether whether history has anything to say about that. In other words, we'll talk about some of the famous moments in history when Jews gave up their lives for Judaism, and the context of that, beyond like the Holocaust, I guess, in history. In lesson 4, I think Mark touched on this a drop, which is titled "Out of the Depths I Call to You." We're gonna talk about how faith can play a role in our own little challenges, so to speak, in our own little holocausts, right? Hopefully, none of us will undergo anything that even can be put in the same sentence as the word Holocaust, but we will all go through some sort of pain, some sort of suffering, some sort of challenge, and we know that Judaism has what to say about that. Faith has a way to navigate that. So we'll talk about that in lesson 4. Lesson 5, which is called "A Tree of Life to Those Who Hold Fast to It," is going to talk about the presence of the Torah in the most trying circumstances. Springboarding from stories in the Holocaust where Jews did their best to keep the Torah and to hold fast to the Torah and to faith and to halacha while they were in the most trying of circumstances. We're going to use that as a springboard to talk about that concept, the idea of holding on. Somebody mentioned it, I forgot who, but the idea of having something to hold on to during these very trying times. And in lesson 6, which is titled "When Night Will Shine Like Day," we're going to talk about Mashiach. We're going to talk about ensuring a brighter tomorrow. We're going to talk about the Jewish view of the future, of ani ma'amin, of I believe that there will be a time in the future when suffering will end and when tragedies will no longer occur. So that's kind of the overall trajectory here. But today, lesson 1 is titled "Wrestling with God." Today's lesson is available to be sponsored. If you'd like to do so, please reach out to me and let me know. And without further ado, let's dive into it. What I'd like to do with you today is the following. I'd like to start off by asking the question, who is bothered by suffering? Who asks these kind of questions? You know the big question, where was God in the Holocaust? Where is God when someone is suffering? Who asks these kind of questions? Who is it that, what is the character profile of someone who is bothered by suffering? And then we're going to ask the actual question, which in philosophical terms is known as theodicy. Why do bad things happen to good people? And from that, we're going to try and gain a perspective of how to view the suffering of others, both in the context of the Holocaust, as well as in the context of, just people that we know that are going through some sort of terrible suffering, whatever, an illness or losing a child or losing a loved one, right? How to view the suffering of others, very psychological in nature, if you will. And then finally, we're going to tackle the big question, which is how could the Holocaust happen in God's world? Okay? These are the 4 questions we'd like to try to talk about today. I think we're going to dive right into it. Any discussion of the Holocaust invariably brings up the issue of where God was during the Holocaust and how could a Holocaust happen in God's world. And before we talk about the actual question, I'd like to talk about the legitimacy of the question. Who is it that asks a question like that? Does a believer even ask, where was God in the Holocaust? Does a believer ask, challenge God? Or is the whole definition of believer someone who has faith? Someone who just accepts that God knows what he's doing. God is omnipotent. God knows the best, right? He's omniscient. And therefore God must know what he's doing and we just accept it, right? The reason I think that this is such an important place to start our conversation is because I think there are a lot of people that A, ask the question, but then B, beat themselves up for asking the question. Does that make sense? Like, am I a bad Jew because I don't just believe that God knows what he's doing and I ask a question, why is this person suffering? Does that make me a bad Jew? Do I not have faith? So before we even ask the question, I want to start off by giving the answer to that question as a resounding no. A person is not weak of faith because they challenge God. In fact, we're going to see that it's exactly the opposite. Let's dive into it. Let's start with text 1. We're on page 2 here. Mickey, if I can ask you to get us started. This is a quote from the Talmud. All right?
Okay.
These are a few texts that address this issue. Start with text 1.
Who is bothered by suffering? Moses said before God, Master of the universe, what is the reason that there are righteous people for whom things are good, and there are righteous people for whom things are bad? And there are wicked people for whom things are good, and there are wicked people for whom things are bad.
So who asks these kind of questions? The answer is Moses. If you're okay being in the company of Moses, then you're okay answering this question. People like Moses asked this question. Who else we got here? Ron, you want to read for us, please? Text 2, page 3. This is from Habakkuk, one of the prophets.
All right. Lord, how long will I cry and you will not hear? I cry out to you of violence and you will not save. Why do you show me iniquity and look upon mischief and plunder and violence are before me? And the one who bears quarrel and strife endures. Therefore Torah is slackened, and the justice does not go out forever. For a wicked man surrounds the righteous. Therefore justice emerges perverted. Why should you gaze upon traitors? Be silent when a wicked man swallows up one more righteous than he.
So who asks questions like this? Habakkuk asks questions like this. I won't go on. As you can see, this can become quite exhaustive. Yirmiyahu asks questions like this in his book of prophets, Jeremiah. King David asks questions like this in Tehillim, in the Psalms, in a few different places. Malachi asks this question. King Solomon asks this question in Kohelet, in Ecclesiastes. The angels ask this question. Many of you might be familiar that on Yom Kippur, when we read about the 10 martyrs, the Asara Harugi Malchus, we read Eila Eskira, right? A potent poem where the angels themselves cry out to God, saying, "Is this the Torah and this is reward? How can you let this evil tyrant slaughter these sages this way?" And God says, "Shtok, be quiet. So it has arisen in my will, in my mind." In other words, this question is asked by believers, and I would argue that it is specifically asked by believers. In order to ask this question, one needs to be a believer. That's what I would say. There's a letter of the Rebbe that we're going to read now from 1963. It's text 3, and Mark Essenstein, you have the okay. So I'm going to ask you to read it in just a moment. But it's a letter that the Rebbe writes to a woman who wrote. I mean, I don't want to belittle her question, but she wrote a very classic post-Holocaust letter. You know, I don't believe in God. Where was he when 6 million? Da 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 da. You know, like a whole thing, basically making the statement that I don't believe in God because if God was present in the Holocaust, then he would have stopped it. And where is God? And then that sort of thing. And the Rebbe makes a very interesting argument to her. It's a fairly lengthy letter. So as Mark reads it to us, if I can ask you to follow along, it's on page 4, text 3. Go ahead, Mark, when you're ready.
I think I'm on the right one. I have written,
Yes.
okay, all of the above in reply to your letter. In truth, however, not only do I not believe you when you say that you do not believe in God, God forbid, but it is also clear to me that you do not believe so either. Do not believe me that you do not believe so either. My proof of this is that on every occasion that you've witnessed injustice in your surroundings, or when you think of the Holocaust perpetuated by Hitler, may his name be blotted out. As you mentioned in your letter, you are outraged. But if it were the case that the world has no ruler and planner, why should it surprise you that there transpires unjust things and that whoever is bigger and more powerful than his fellow swallows him alive? This applies not only to events on the scale of the Holocaust, but also to the routine flow of our daily lives, which every time we perceive something that is wrong and unjust, this disturbs our tranquility, since we are not convinced that things should not be this way. But why shouldn't they be? The physical substance of the universe is not supposed to be moral, and neither are the animals. Obviously, our outrage over the injustice we see derives from the conviction in something higher than all physical things, including human beings. This conviction is embedded in the heart of every human being, which is why all concur that there is right and wrong, and that the world ought to conform to what is right. Thus, when we witness a wrong, we immediately seek an explanation. Why is it so? What has caused something to be other than what it ought to be?
Thank you, Mark. The Rebbe posits to this woman I know you tell me that you don't believe in God, but I don't believe you that you don't believe in God. And I'll go one step further. I don't even think you are convinced that you don't believe in God. Why is that? Says the Rebbe, because when I read between the lines, I see that you're bothered by injustice. And this is where the Rebbe really makes a brilliant point. To be bothered by injustice is to believe in God. Because as the Rebbe points out, if the world has no ruler and planner, then why should it surprise you that injustices occur? Right? For example, we are only bothered by injustices in the human realm. Right? Question for the crowd. If the world is a jungle, right? Look at the picture in front of us. If there was a National Geographic narrator with a British accent narrating this, there would not be a single word about injustice. It would just be, this is the natural order, right? This is the world, dog eat dog, right? There's the predator, and there's this. That's the world. That's the nature of animals. That's the nature of the world, and that's the way it operates. The very fact that we're not sad, and that could be a simple answer for why human beings slaughter each other on October 7th or in the Holocaust, or even when a burglary goes wrong and someone murders an unfortunate victim, right? That could be the answer. It's just dog eat dog, and that's the world, and that's it. People like that don't write long-winded letters to the Rebbe about how they don't believe in God, and because if God did truly exist, then how could injustice exist in the world? The only person who is bothered by that is someone who inherently believes in God. Now, we're not saying that belief is unshakable. We're not saying that they have all the answers to the questions, but they do believe in God. In other words, to believe in that something is unjust is to believe that there is a creator and planner, and how can he allow something like this to happen? This, I think, is the reason why we find that the prototype of someone who asks the question, why do good things happen to bad people? Why do bad things happen to good people? Or where was God in the Holocaust? Or how could God allow October 7th to happen? The prototype of someone who asks that question, I believe, is a believer. It is someone who fundamentally believes in God and is therefore struggling to make sense of this injustice. Now, this doesn't mean that they're at peace. This means it's someone who's wrestling with God. This means it's someone who has an expectation that the world should function with justice and equity, and it's not. They also have a belief that God should be running the world in a just manner, and he doesn't seem to be. And that's where the challenge comes up. So the Rebbe is not suggesting that there is no question. The Rebbe is just suggesting that perhaps the question is different than we sometimes allow ourselves. Like if we were okay just saying God doesn't exist, then we would have moved on long ago from the question of the Holocaust. That's it. It was human being, it was humanity at its worst. It was unlucky, 6 million unlucky victims, and we move on. The very fact that we cannot move on means we do believe that there is a planner and an orchestrator and a designer to this world. So now let's tackle, now we understand the basis for this question. I'd like to tackle the question head on. Why do bad things happen to good people? Turns out that this question, known as I mentioned earlier, known as theodicy, is based on 3 core principles or core beliefs about God. Mark Schneider, if I can ask you to read for us, please, text 4.
Okay.
On page 6. Go ahead.
Okay. In its classical formulation, the problem of evil is a problem of logical consistency. The opponent of theism alleges that a triad of properties traditionally held to belong to God's nature, omniscience, omnipotence, and omnibenevolence, are not jointly consistent with the evidence, with the existence of evil in the world.
Okay. So to take that simple question, where is God when someone is suffering? Where is God when a Holocaust is occurring? Where is God on October 7th? To take that simple question and to break it down, we need to understand exactly what it is that we're struggling with, okay? And what we're struggling with is, we believe in God, and we believe that God is A, B, C. He is omnipotent, he is omnibenevolent, and he is omniscient. Let me define each of those one at a time, and then I'll explain what I mean by that. Omnipotent means God is all powerful. Omni, all, potent, powerful. Omnibenevolent means that God is all good. He is always good he's always doing good. He's all loving. He doesn't want to do anything terrible. He is not seductive. That's what I'm looking for, right? In nature. And omniscient means that he is all knowing. He knows about everything that goes on in this world. Now, if a person believes that God is only two of these three, never mind one of these three, they should not struggle with the question of evil in this world. We only struggle with evil in this world because we believe these three attributes to be true about God. Let's do an exercise on page 7. I'd like you all to do it together with me. If you have a pen, please do it with a pen. If not, just follow along with me. Let's do a little thought experiment where we believe in a God, okay? We all believe in a God, but we believe that God is, and I'm doing the first column here, he's omnipotent, all-powerful, benevolent, right? Only wants good to other people. He's kind, but he's not omniscient. He doesn't know about everything that goes on. Okay, thought experiment. He's a great God. He's very powerful. He's very kind, but he does not. Sorry, that's my phone. I should have put it on vibrate. I usually tell everybody else to put it on vibrate, and here I am. Just a second, and now it's on vibrate. In such a world where God is omnipotent, benevolent, but not omniscient, do children suffer? Anybody? Yes, Mark. Why?
You're asking me why they suffer?
Yeah. No, not why they suffer. I'm saying why in such a world would you say that children suffer?
Because that's the way the world is. Some children will suffer.
No. Again, look, we're doing a thought experiment here. We believe in a God. The God is all-powerful and good, but he's not omniscient. He's not all-knowing. The answer we're looking for is children suffer because God would like to stop all children suffering, but he doesn't know about it. There's a child suffering in Africa under a table, and he just doesn't know about it because he's not omniscient. He doesn't know about all suffering. Does prayer work? The answer is yes, prayer works. You can pray to God, but that God does not necessarily know about the suffering, right? And maybe prayer even works more than that because you're bringing suffering to God's attention when he wasn't aware of it, right? Is it a good world? Yeah, I mean, it's a good world. Just, unfortunately, the God that runs this world doesn't know about everything, right? And that's why it would resolve the contradiction in God and suffering. If we believed in a God that was only omnipotent, benevolent, but not omniscient, that would mean suffering can exist, children can suffer, the world can have pockets of the world that are not good, because God does not know about that, right? Okay, fine. So let's give omniscience back to God. Second column. Mickey, I'm going to pick on you for this one. You ready? Just unmute yourself. If God is omniscient, so he knows about everything, every single person suffering in this world he knows about. He's also benevolent. He's kind. He wants everybody to have the best. But he's not omnipotent. He's not all-powerful. In a world like that, do children suffer?
Yes.
Why?
Well, because God has no potency, no power to...
He can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
He's aware of every single child starving in Africa, right? And he even feels for them, and his heart goes out to them, and he really wants to help them because he's so good, right? But he can't do anything about it. He just doesn't have the ability maybe to bring food to that particular corner of the world. Does prayer work? Not really. Because you're praying to him, but he might not be able to do what you. I mean, like it's like if somebody prays to me. Somebody tells me, Rabbi, my wife has cancer. Can you please cure her? I mean, I'd love to. I'm just not omnipotent like that, right? And is this a good world? Pockets of it are good. Pockets of it are not going to be good because God can't fix them. So again, it would resolve the contradiction between God and suffering. God could exist, but because he's not omnipotent, therefore suffering would still exist. And I think you see where we're going here. In the third column, the same thing happens. If God knows about everything and has the ability to fix everything, but he's an evil God, he's just, I don't know, he's, he enjoys watching other people suffer. So then children will suffer, not because God can't fix it, not because he doesn't know about it, because God doesn't want to cure them or to right? And the same thing with everything. So again, it would resolve that issue of God and suffering existing together. The point we're trying to make is, when a person asks a question, where is God during suffering? We are asking that question based on ascribing to God, attributing to God, three pillars of, three fundamental qualities that God has. He is all-powerful, he is all-knowing, and he is all-good. He is kind. That's the God we are choosing to believe in. Hence, we ask the question. So, A, I believe in God. B, I believe all these three things are true about God. Therefore, I ask the question, where was God during the Holocaust? Why would he allow people to suffer? And your three basic answers are gone. Your answer of he doesn't know about it is gone because you believe God is omniscient. Your answer of he cannot do anything about it is gone because he's omnipotent. And your answer that he doesn't want to do anything about it is gone because he's kind. He's benevolent. So that's where we land. And now we understand the question properly. I think we can move on to presenting some Jewish theodicies, if you will, some Jewish wisdom, ancient Jewish wisdom on dealing with this question. But before we do so, we need to make a few, not disclaimers, a few very important introductions. Hold on a second. I should clarify that this is why Judaism, Jewish literature is full of ascribing all of these qualities to God. Let's go through them one at a time. Mark Schneider, you want to read this one for us in the English? God is omnipotent. This is found in many verses in the Torah. Where do we see that God is omnipotent?
Okay, let me get there. Okay, God said, that one?
No.
God said
on the screen, not in the.
On the screen. Oh, hold on.
The king is not saved. You see that?
Hold on. I can't get it.
That's okay.
I'm sorry.
All right, Mickey, you want to read for us, please?
Sure. Omnipotent. The king is not saved by a vast army. A mighty man will not be rescued with great strength. The horse is false hope for victory. Our soul waits for the Lord. He is our help and our shield.
This is one of hundreds of places throughout Tanakh where we see omnipotence ascribed to God. Ron, where do we see omniscience ascribed to God on the screen?
And they say God will not see, neither will the God of Jacob pay attention. Think, you brutish among the people, and you fools, when you will understand. He that planted the ear, shall he not hear? He that formed the eye, shall he not see? God knows the thoughts of man.
So again, this is one of hundreds of places where we ascribe omniscience to God. And finally, Mark Essenstein, you want to read for us? Benevolence, also very often ascribed to God in Tanakh.
There is none gracious and compassionate like you, a God slow to anger and abounding in kindness and truth. For such is your way, to bestow unmerited kindness in each and every generation.
This comes from the morning prayer. This is actually Hashem Kel Rachum V'Chanun Erech Hapayim Rav Chesed V'Emes. For those of you that are familiar, we say it on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. We also say it every morning in our prayers in the Tachanun right after the Amidah prayer. So, in other words, to ask this question is I think, almost solely the pursuit of the believer. And not just of the believer, but of the believer that ascribes all of this power and potency, if you will, to God. These three qualities. Okay. So now, having clarified the question, now we can move on to providing some of the Jewish wisdom that there is on theodicy from the Torah perspective. But first, there's a few disclaimers that we need to make. Not disclaimers, a few introductions. Number one is, I want to start off by making a very, very clear distinction between the Jewish view on the suffering of others and the Jewish view of our own suffering. Okay? There is a beautiful letter, I think it was of the previous rabbi. I can't remember. I didn't prepare this before the lesson to quote this. It's just occurring to me as I'm talking now, where the previous rabbi is talking about how one goes about serving God on their own and how one goes about helping someone else serve God. And it's very, very different. Because when you're talking to yourself, you have the ability to talk to yourself in certain words. And the obligations are only for you to serve God in the best way possible. When you are assisting someone else in serving God, someone else in navigating life, you have an additional obligation, which is to be sensitive to them, to be empathetic to them. In addition to giving the right path, there's how and when and what to tell them. So distinction that I want to make is, as we start to tackle this question, I want you to know that we are going to be talking about it only from the perspective of viewing the suffering of others. How we view our own suffering is going to be the topic of lesson 4. And what role faith can play in our own suffering, that will be the topic of lesson 4. But for now, we are going to be talking strictly, which I guess is appropriate. Like we're applying it basically to the Holocaust or to October 7th. Thank God we're all here. We're all alive. We are not victims of the Holocaust or October 7th. So it's a very different approach when you are the person who's suffering versus when you're talking about viewing someone else's suffering. The Jewish view differs greatly. It doesn't mean that the truth changes. It just means that the approach changes. So that's a very big division that I wanted to make. The second, not distinction, but introduction that I want to make is that the way we're going to go about this is we're going to start by viewing tragedy and suffering in Tanakh and how some of the greats approached it. Namely, we're going to talk about Abraham and Moses. Abraham Avinu, Abraham our patriarch, and Moses our teacher, Moshe Rabbeinu. You should know that this is a selection of 2 among many, all right? And we're going to view their approach. What happened when Abraham was faced with a mini Holocaust? What was his approach? What did he do when he was faced with a mini Holocaust? What did Moses do when he was faced with a mini Holocaust? And you should know that this is one of many. If you want to see some others, there's a supplementary text actually at the back of the lesson. I think it's text B, maybe? Yes, text B is going to be when Gideon, a possibly lesser known prophet, does exactly the same thing. And we're going to try to learn from their model of what it means to be a witness to such a horrible tragedy. What does it mean to wrap our brains around that? Let's start with Avraham Avinu, Abraham our forefather. I'm going to ask Ron, if you can read for us, please, text 5. And while Ron reads text 5, I'm putting up 3 questions on the board that I'd like you to think about as Ron is reading the text. Think about Abraham's perspective. What is Abraham doing when he's finding out about this mini Holocaust? When he's finding out about this tragedy? And then we'll unpack it together after he finishes. When you're ready, you can read text 5. Ron, go ahead.
God said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I am going to do? Abraham is about to become a great and mighty nation, and through him all nations of the world will be blessed. I have given him special attention so that he will command his children and his household after him, and they will keep God's way, doing charity and justice. God will then bring about for Abraham everything he promised." God then said, "The outcry against Sodom is so great and their sin is so very grave. I will descend and see. Have they done everything implied by the outcry that is coming before me? If not, I will know." The men turned from where they were and headed toward Sodom. Abraham was still standing before God. He came forward and said, "Will you actually wipe out the innocent together with the guilty? Suppose there are 50 innocent people in the city. Would you still destroy it and not spare the place for the sake of the 50 good people inside it? It would be sacrilege even to ascribe such an act to you, to kill the innocent with the guilty, letting the righteous and the wicked fare alike. It would be sacrilege to ascribe this to you. Shall the whole world's judge not act justly?" God said, "If I find 50 innocent people in Sodom, I will spare the entire area for their sake."
Okay. I'm assuming this is a story most of us are familiar with, but just in case, let me give you the background. Sodom and Gomorrah, Sodom and Amorah, Adma and Tzvoyim were some very, very wicked cities where some really wicked behaviors were going down, both sexually, in the realm of man-to-man violations, abuse, physical abuse, even violence that would happen there on a routine basis. And God decides that he's going to destroy these cities entirely. He's going to overturn them, and rain ash and soot down upon them, etc. Okay. The Torah then opens up by saying, in other words, we learn about this story by God saying, "Hamechasani mehavram es asher ani osa." Can I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? And God chooses to tell Abraham about this impending doom. Now, for those of you that don't know the end of the story, it does indeed happen. The city is destroyed, but not before Abraham protests and Abraham negotiates with God. So we ended the text with, he asks, are there 50 people? Right? And God says, if there are 50 innocent people in Sodom, I will spare the entire area for their sake. He goes down to 40, to 30, to 10. Okay, beautiful. And then eventually it ends, and it turns out there's no righteous people in the city of Sodom, and the city of Sodom and Amorah, etc., are wiped out. Okay. The first question I want to ask is, how would you characterize Abraham's conduct in dealing with God? Anybody?
Great. I think it's good.
Okay, great, good.
He doesn't want an innocent person killed.
Yeah, but I'm looking for something else. He's brazen. Does anybody else see that? Look at the way he talks to God. Contrast him, for example, versus the we knocked it down almost immediately, but the position that we suggested at the beginning of the lesson, that perhaps to question God is not the position of Judaism. The opposite is true here. Abraham takes a very brazen position where he challenges God. Chutzpah is the word I would use, right? He takes chutzpah and he compounds it by, first of all, not letting up, as we spoke about the fact that he goes down more and more and more and more. But also look at the way he challenges God from himself. He's like, you claim that you're just, but you're not being just. You're not giving them a chance. Right?
God wanted him to be questioned.
Very good. Exactly. And that's where we get to point number 2. Why do you think God informs Abraham's decision to destroy the wicked? This is why we started our text before Abraham even starts talking. What happens? God says, will I hide it from Abraham? Right? Look at there's a term there. Give me a second. There's a term there in the middle where he says, in the Hebrew, here, because I know that he is going to command his children and his household after him to follow the ways of tzedek umishpat, the ways of justice and kindness, right, of charity and justice. Therefore, God tells him about what he's doing. In other words, God is giving him a softball pitch, right? He's giving him a soft pitch. Dude, here is an injustice. I want you to protest it. This is such an interesting perspective. God tells him about it, and God is planning to do it, but he wants Abraham, remember the first Jew, and whose qualities we all inherit, and whose qualities we all inherit, he wants him to protest it. He's presenting a scenario of injustice saying, are you Jewish? If you're Jewish, protest it. And what does Abraham do? Abraham doesn't just protest it. He says to God, in the Torah that you gave us, what does he do? He looks into the qualities that are he applies the principles of God's Torah to God's own actions. He holds him to his own standard. He says, Hashofet kol haaretz lo yaseh mishpat. Will the one who judges the entire earth with the Torah, right, and with everything, will he not do justice himself? These 3 points, I think, lead to a very, very powerful conclusion, which is that in the case of Abraham, the reason why God was even letting him in on the situation is because God wanted him to pray to him. God wanted him to challenge him with the hopes that Abraham would actually be able to turn the situation around. Which leads us to the same conclusion about ourselves. What is our posture when we witness tragedy? God doesn't want a whole bunch of robots that look at him and say, yes, sirree, Bob, yes, sirree, Bob, you decided to kill 6 million Jews, we're with you, you must know better than us. That's not what God wants. The posture we're supposed to have is one of defiance. If we are following in our forefathers' way, in Abraham's way, then the posture we have when faced with October 7th, when faced with tragedy, when faced with suffering, when faced with even a friend who lost a child at a young age, our posture is, no, God, I will not make excuses for you. I will use every ounce of Jewish chutzpah that I have to challenge you and to say, I will not live in a world where this exists. Okay. The same thing happens with Gideon, as I mentioned, and the same thing happens with Moses. Let's read text 6. Again, I want you to keep certain things in mind. These are the points we mentioned earlier. Okay. Mickey, if I can ask you to read text 6.
Sure.
While Mickey reads text 6, I want you to address the following questions. Number 1, if Moses was a man of absolute faith, one of the greatest Jewish leaders of all time, why would he argue with God? And number 2, is Moses' blackmail of God not a sign of weak faith? All right? Let's see the story. Again, we have a Jewish leader, a role model in the Torah for us to model after, being faced with a mini Holocaust. Mickey, when you're ready, text 6.
Okay. God declared to Moses, "Go down, for the people whom you brought out of Egypt have become corrupt. They have been quick to leave the way that I ordered them to follow, and they have made themselves a cast metal calf. They have bowed down and offered sacrifice to it, exclaiming, 'This is Israel. This Israel is your God, who brought you out of Egypt.' God then said to Moses, 'I have observed the people, and they are an unbending group. Now do not try to stop me when I unleash my wrath against them to destroy them. I will then make you into a great nation.' Moses began to plead before God, his Lord. He said, 'O God, why unleash your wrath against your people whom you brought out of Egypt with great power and a show of force? Why should Egypt be able to say that you took them out with evil intentions to kill them in the hill country and wipe them out from the face of the earth? Withdraw your display of anger and refrain from doing evil to your people. Remember your servants, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You swore to them by your very essence and declared that you would make their descendants as numerous as the stars of the sky, giving their descendants the land you promised, so that they would be able to occupy it forever.' Moses went back up to God, and he said, 'The people have committed a terrible sin by making a golden idol. Now, if you would, please forgive their sin. If not, you can block me out from the book that you have written.'"
Okay, so he blackmails God, right? All right. Again, we want to look at the posture with which Moses approaches seeing injustice in the world. Remember, Moses is our model of absolute faith. He's one of the greatest Jewish leaders of all time, and yet he's arguing with God. Why is he arguing with God? And I'd like you to look at God's words. You'll see, does anybody see any of the words of God as license, as permission that God is giving to argue? Anybody see that? Examine text 6. Does anybody see the words where God says, "Now do not try to stop me when I unleash my wrath against them to destroy them. I will then make you into a great..." What's going on here? It's almost like when a parent, like I like to play a game with my children sometimes where I'll lie down on the couch and pretend to be asleep and say, "Don't wake up, Tati." But I'm like, but read between the lines. I do want you to come and wake me up, and we're gonna play this game, right? God says, "Don't try to stop me." Don't It reminds me of the classic bar fight or bar brawl where the guy goes, "Hold me back, hold me back, hold me back." Right? Like, what are you doing? You want to fight him or you don't want to fight him, right? It's the same thing. God is coming. He's doing quote unquote justice. The Jewish people have sinned. He's going to destroy them, but he's telling Moses about it. Very bad idea if you really don't want to be challenged. And he's telling him, hold me back, don't try to stop me. I'm going to destroy them. Almost like, come on, read between the lines. You should stop me. And what does Moses do? Moses does. Why would he argue with God? Perhaps Moses sees within the very words of God pleading with him, God begging him to stop him. God is asking him, don't live with injustice. Are you Jewish? If you're Jewish, then you have it within your very DNA, going all the way back to Abraham, not to be able, not to be comfortable, it's not even possible for you to live with injustice. So again, you see that chutzpah. You see that license that Hashem gives him. And then Moses starts to blackmail God. Oh, you're going to start again with me? You're going to start a new nation from me? If you're planning to destroy the Jewish people, not only do I want you to destroy me, I don't even give you license to let my name be mentioned in your Torah. You know the Torah that we call the Torah that Moses gave us, right? Moshe Emet for Torah Emet. It's called the Torah of Moses. Moses says, take my name out of it, right? And by the way, the Medrash teaches us that when a tzaddik says something, when a holy person says something, it has to be fulfilled, even if he said it only on condition. It has to be fulfilled in some small iota, and that's why there's a parsha in the Torah, Parsha Tetzaveh, in which Moses' name does not appear at all. Okay. Having said all that, Moses is blackmailing God. Normally, when somebody blackmails somebody else, it's because they don't see any other choice. They feel weak, so therefore they're threatening. Therefore, right? We all know this. If you have real power, you don't need to threaten anyone else. You don't need to blackmail anyone else. You have real power, and by the very notion of you willing something, it will happen. Right? So usually blackmailing or threatening is a sign of weakness. Is it a sign of weakness here? I would say no. I would say it's not a sign of weakness, because what Moses is doing, what Abram and Moses are both doing, is refusing to be comfortable with tragedy. They're refusing to be complacent. They're refusing to live in a world where injustice is a reality. You know, there's a great Chabad thinker. His name is Rabbi Manis Friedman. Anybody ever hear of him or watch some of his videos? Yeah. So I once heard him give a great analogy. He talks about when a young child, I'll give my children as an example. When my son Menachem, possibly, right, so let's say 7 years old, accompanies me to the doctor and watches my 1-year-old Leah get a shot. So obviously she's crying because she's getting the shot. But then my son will often also start to cry. He starts to cry because he sees that she's in pain, and they're doing something horrible to her. So the natural tendency of parents in such a situation is what? You look at the older child, right? And you say to the child, don't cry. It's okay. What they're doing is good for her. They're giving her vaccination, yada, yada, whatever it is, right? And we say, don't cry. It's okay. What they're doing is good for her. It seems like she's in pain, and she is in pain right now, but it's worth it because, etc. Really, if we truly understood what was going on here, we would never, ever tell the child not to cry. Why is the child crying? The child is crying, using my terminology here from this class, because the child is Jewish. The child is crying because the child sees someone else in pain and cannot stand watching someone else be in pain. The child sees an injustice. Now, what you're trying to do is tell the child, I know you have this great tendency, this great resistance to watching somebody else in pain. Mute it, numb it, tone it down, don't cry. Why? Because there's a reason why she's suffering. No. If we truly want to teach that child, we would say to that child, I'm crying too, together with you. It's difficult for me also. I keep telling myself that it's for her own good, but it's difficult for me to watch somebody else in pain. That reaction, that visceral reaction that we have when we watch somebody else in pain, which is resistance, which is an inability to sit comfortably by, that is a good thing, and we shouldn't be looking to get rid of that. Okay, so now let's try the exercise on page 12. So it's a little bit of a redundant exercise, but still I think it's probably worth it. Who's going to read the exercise for us? Mark or Shari, can you read for us now, or?
So sorry, I don't have a book.
Oh, no worries. Perfect. Okay, if you want to follow along with us while we're reading, you can find the PDF.
Where are we?
We're going to be on page 12. We're going to do an optional exercise, which is called a letter to Sam. So Mark Schneider, you want to read for us?
Okay, I'm just about there.
Sam Goldberg.
Okay. Sam Goldberg is beloved by everyone who knows him. He is regarded as an exemplary human being. He is hardworking and scrupulously honest. He has a beautiful family, a wonderful marriage, and has raised well-adjusted children who are moral and upstanding people. He is deeply committed to Judaism and practices mitzvot in his daily life. In short, Sam Goldberg is a real mensch. When Sam turns 50, his life begins to fall apart. First, he is fired from his job. Then Sam receives a call from his doctor informing him that he has developed an incurable form of cancer, which usually results in death within 6 months. Sam has emailed you asking for a response to the following question: why are such bad things happening to me when I have always tried to be a good person? It is your turn to write a 1-paragraph letter to Sam. What will you say?
All right, let's do this exercise, shall we? Mickey, I'm going to pick on you. You're writing a letter back to Sam. He is clearly suffering. It clearly seems to be unjust. What are the main points that you are going to highlight in your letter to Sam? What are the main approaches that you're going to take? Mickey, go for it.
Okay. Well, this kind of suffering, there was a book that came out a number of years ago by a rabbi. It's not why bad things happen to good people, but when bad things happen to good people. I'm blocking on the name of the rabbi. But I was always taken by his, where he goes with that. And it's to kind of highlight that God is there. God is compassionate towards your suffering and feels your suffering, is aware of your suffering, and why it has happened. We can't know that it's, kind of been because of something you've done or not done or anything like that, but just to know that Hashem feels your suffering, and people around you can be compassionate towards your suffering and feel your pain, but there's not really an explanation for why has this happened to you and not me? Or
very good. So I want to point out, before we get to all the things Mickey did say, towards the end, I want to point out what he said would be probably the biggest faux pas to mention in the letter. Even if you have a reason, let's say you watched him, heard somebody else once upon a time 30 years ago, and you feel like that might be the reason why he's suffering now, giving any reason in your email to Sam is the wrong posture to have. When we're talking about the suffering of someone else, obviously number one is empathy, right? I'm so sorry for what you're going through. But then number two, most important, is to make sure not to fall into the pit, into the trap of trying to give a reason for his suffering, even if one occurs to you. And then from that, it can be, what can I do? Can I do anything to help you feel better? And then probably most important is the main overarching point which Mickey made, which is knowing that Hashem is still there for you, still loves you, and is still listening to you. So can I daven for you, encouraging them to daven for themselves, to continue their relationship with Hashem through the suffering. Even if there's anger involved here, that's okay. They can be angry at God, right? But to have that conversation with God, to pray to God, etc. Notice that there's a few things which were not here. Number one was a reason. There was no reason given for the suffering. But number two, there was no insistence that you accept the status quo. Because that's the most important thing that we learned from Abraham and from Moses. Just because right now you're suffering doesn't mean that you have to become comfortable with that suffering. You don't have to learn to accept your suffering. You can live in constant resistance to the fact that God has given you this suffering. And particularly to us who are only writing the email to Sam, and we aren't Sam. So for Sam himself to say, maybe it's because 3 months ago I did something and therefore to decide to do teshuvah, good on him. He can do that. But as somebody observing him going through his pain, we have to live in complete resistance, in complete protest, if you will, to the fact that God would subject him to this kind of pain. And to daven and to protest and to ask, Ad Masai, until when will Hashem put him through this pain? Okay. In the remaining 30 minutes of the lesson, what I'd like to do is, I'd like to try and apply this to the topic of the Holocaust, to apply everything we've learned today to the question of where was God in the Holocaust, or why would God allow the Holocaust to happen, etc. But I want to start off by making a few very, very crucial points before we even start to have a conversation about the Holocaust. Number one is my personal pet peeve. I don't like talking about the Holocaust. Why don't I like talking about the Holocaust? Not because it makes me feel uncomfortable, not because, it's a difficult topic. No. The reason I don't like talking about the Holocaust is because when you talk about the Holocaust, you're implying that there are lots of, one of the hardest things for me about giving this course was to say I'm giving another course. I didn't like that. I don't like the Holocaust fitting as another book on a shelf of books. Does that make sense? I have 8 books on my shelf. One of them is about the decoding the Talmud, and one of them is about history, and one of them is about Jewish trivia. And here's another one that's just about 6 million people. That the Holocaust doesn't fit in that way. It really doesn't fit in even into conversation, into having a conversation about it. I'll explain what I mean. The Holocaust doesn't really fit into conversation because when you put it into conversation, you're implying that sometimes we talk about the weather, sometimes we talk about sports, sometimes we talk about politics, sometimes we talk about relationships, sometimes we talk about how I'm feeling, and then sometimes I talk about the Holocaust. And it doesn't really fit in that category. That's what I mean. In an ideal world, the Holocaust wouldn't be speakable. It would be the unspeakable. Unfortunately, we live in a world where the Holocaust happened. So, and the only tool we have to grapple with it is to speak about it, is to have a conversation about it, is to rationalize with it or intellectualize with it. But I would prefer to live in a world with a Holocaust. I would prefer to live in a world of the year 1900, where somebody even mentions the preposterous idea of somebody killing 6 million Jews in a systematic way, right? And all the victims of the Holocaust all together with them. It is not even like, what are you nuts? Such a thing could never happen in the world. It just simply cannot happen. That's the world I prefer to live in. That's what I mean by the Holocaust should be an unspeakable subject. So therefore, I want to start off by making a couple of ground rules. Number one is, everybody that's in this virtual classroom has already thought about the issue of where was God during the Holocaust, about this big question. And all of us have different thoughts about it. And as a result, because there's no real answer to the question, I think that every view has to be respected. I also think it's a very emotionally charged issue. And therefore, no one has the right to dictate how someone else should feel or think about the Holocaust, right? If we're talking about a different subject, if we're talking about, I don't know, whatever it is, right? How to buy a house, then I could tell you, I think you're wrong to take out a mortgage. I think you should only buy it when you have enough money to buy it out. And you can tell me, no, I think you should take out a mortgage, whatever it is, right? There could be 2 different opinions, and I can tell you, I think you're wrong, and you can tell me, I think I'm wrong. But in a situation here where it's not possible for any of us to be wrong, and it's really an emotional question, I think that's very important. So what am I trying to do here? Why am I going to be presenting some perspective on this? My goal here is just to provide another perspective, perhaps an alternative viewpoint based on some elements of Torah, even though lots of the other perspectives are also based on Torah, that you might not have considered, and that perhaps can add a little bit to the conversation that I'm sure you've had with yourself and with others about the Holocaust. Particularly the element that I'm going to share today is something that has helped me in my life. So if it can help you in your life, then I think it could be useful. And I think that no matter where we land by the time all this is done, I think we've already gained a tremendous amount. Why? Because I think that it's important for all of us to know that even asking the question or wrestling with the question is not a bad thing. It doesn't make us flawed. In fact, it makes us whole. That itself, asking the question itself, is a good place to be. Having made some of those, having laid some of those ground rules, I'd like to present some of the Jewish belief when it comes to God's omnipotence, omniscience, and benevolence still being true, and the Holocaust still happening in God's world. Okay? All right. The point that I'm going to make over the next 20 minutes is a four-pronged point. So let me summarize it first, and then we'll go through them one by one. The first idea is that easy answers are likely to lead to human rationalizations. Meaning, as human beings, anybody ever have that instinctive desire to finish a song? Like you hear somebody start a verse of a song and they cut it off halfway through because they got interrupted by something, and you must complete it in your head. Or somebody asks a question and you feel like you need to answer it, right? That's a human, it's baked into our DNA. We like to make sense of things. We like to try to understand things. And when it comes to the Holocaust, this is the first point we're going to make, we have to resist that urge. I would rather admit the difficulty of the question than embrace any answer, as best of an answer as you can give me. I prefer to live in a world where the question is unanswered than where the question is answered. That's number one. Number two, I think it's important to be able to say, I don't know. I think it's important to be able to acknowledge the limits to human understanding. In Hebrew, this is known as lo machshavotay machshavotechem. Our thoughts are not his thoughts. There is human intellect, and then there might be godly intellect, which is more than that. And to dovetail off that, I'd like to make that sophisticated. What I mean by that is, sometimes we think of I don't know as like oh yeah, that's a stupid answer. That means you're weak. That means you don't know the answer. Look at you. You don't have complete knowledge. I'd like to suggest that actually perhaps even more sophisticated than having an answer to the question is saying I don't know about that question. And the reason for that is because we are essentially redefining the question why. Right? Normally, the question why is answered by the word because. Why did you go to the store? Because I wanted to buy a loaf of bread. Right? Why did he hit him in the face? Because he insulted him. We give answers to explain. Somebody wants to know why a sequence of events happened, then we give answers to explain why. By admitting that our tendency to comprehend it and to make sense of it is wrong, and that we'd do better off to say I don't know, and that's actually an advanced answer to say I don't know, we are essentially redefining the question of why. The question was, why would God allow the Holocaust to happen? This is not a why asking for a because. This is a why that we want to forever remain a why. We want it to act as a resistance, as a protest to the very notion. Right? Like when you see somebody do something stupid and you say, why would you do that? You don't want them to say, oh, because, right? Like somebody crashed into somebody else and why would you do that? Why did they do that? You're not looking for the actual explanation for why he did that. You would rather it didn't happen. That's the type of why. And that's really where we're trying to land all the way at the end of this conversation. So let's go through it one step at a time. Number one, let's establish the natural human instinct that there is to comprehend. And for this, we're going to turn to Maimonides, the Rambam. In his Guide for the Perplexed, in text 7, he observes this human tendency. Ron, if you can, please, text 7 on page 13.
There are things for which man will find that he has a great longing to apprehend. The sway of the intellect endeavoring to seek for and to investigate their true reality exists in every group of men engaged in speculation, in every age. With regard to such things, there is a multiplicity of opinions. Disagreement arises between the men engaged in speculation, and doubts crop up. All this because the intellect is attached to an apprehension of these things. I mean to say, because of its longing for them, and also because everyone thinks that he has found a way by means of which he will know the true reality of the matter.
Thank you, Ron. It is a natural human desire to want to understand everything, right? As Einstein put it, I want to know all God's thoughts, all the rest are just details. I want to know everything. The danger that is inherent when we take that posture where we want to know everything, the baked-in assumption is that we can know everything. So therefore, what we do is we try to bend and twist and find answers to things, even if those answers are not true. They aren't really the reality, but at least I know it. At least I have an answer. It doesn't make a difference if that answer is not true. It doesn't make a difference if that answer doesn't hold up. At least I've answered the question. Anybody, does this sound familiar to anybody? Anybody who's been through any level of American educational system is familiar with this, whether in college or in kindergarten or in K through 8. They want answers to questions. That's what they want. There's a test, there's a quiz, the teacher asks a question and asks for people to raise their hand. All you want to do is answer it. And if you're the smartest kid in the class, so we are told, you can answer all those questions. The danger that there is in that is there are some questions out there in the world that are inherently unknowable. For this, let's turn to Job. We mentioned these points already. For this, we turn to Job, who is going to teach us that actually we cannot know everything. There are certain things that are just simply impossible for us to know. Mark Essenston, if you can read for us, please, text 8, which is God's response to Job after all of Job's suffering, for those that are familiar with the story of Job.
Okay. Then the Lord answered Job, the tempest, and said, "Who is this who gives dark counsel with words without knowledge? How gird your loins like a man, and I will ask you, and you tell me, where were you when I founded the earth? Tell if you know understanding. Have you come into the locks of the sea, and have you walked in the searching out of the deep? Have the gates of death been revealed to you? And do you see the gates of the shadow of death? Do you understand everything until the breaths of the earth? Tell if you know it all."
Thank you, Mark. Sometimes when I'm teaching a class, somebody will ask a question and I don't know the answer. I've recently adopted the custom of telling them thank you for allowing me the opportunity today to say I don't know. In other words, as human beings, we should become comfortable. I think the main point of this text is that as human beings, we should become comfortable with saying I don't know. And not every we'll soon get to the fact, not every I don't know is an admission of weakness. Saying I don't know can sometimes actually be a very, very sophisticated answer. Because what you're saying is not I don't know because I haven't learned. I don't know because I'm dumb. I don't know because nobody has let me know. What you're saying is I don't know because it is unknowable. Mickey, if you can read for us, please, text 9.
For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, says the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts. Isaiah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mickey. This text is making the same points as the previous text. It's making it in a much more direct fashion. It's not God challenging someone saying, "Oh, where were you when I created the world? You really think you know everything?" This is God saying it as a matter of fact. There are things that as a human being, with your human intellect, you will not be able to know. And now to point 3. That's not a weakness. That's actually a sophisticated answer. Saying I don't know should be our goal. If you now know the answer to a question, your goal should be, how can I get smarter so that I will not know the answer to that question? How can I reach a higher level where I actually don't know? There's an article, I'll link it in the after lesson email. There's an article written by Dr. Yaakov Brower. Yaakov Brower is a professor at McGill University. I'm pretty sure he's still with us. He's probably pretty elderly, but he's probably retired at this point. Either way, he's a professor at McGill University, and he has this article called In Pursuit of Ignorance, in which he talks about first of all, it's a scathing review of the Western college system, because the Western college system is inherently in pursuit of knowledge. In other words, the built-in assumption is we can know everything that we set our minds to, without a humility of actually maybe the more I learn, I'll realize the less I know. And for anybody who's lived a couple of years on this planet, you're aware that actually the more you're around and the more you study, the less you realize you know. The closer you get to knowledge, so to speak, the closer you get to God, I would say, the less you realize you understand about God. So when you're 5 years old and you're in kindergarten, you think you know everything there is to know about God. Then you become 10 years old, you realize that knowledge was a very premature, very immature knowledge. And now that I've grown, I actually realize how little I know about God. Okay, but then I learn more, and now I'm convinced I know about God. And he talks about this, and he talks about how the whole posture is wrong, because to be in pursuit of knowledge is essentially to build in the assumption that we could know everything. Anyways, it's a much lengthier point, and he makes it very beautifully. So I'll just link it in the after lesson email. But that is essentially the idea that we're saying here. The ultimate level of knowledge is to know when and why something cannot be known. To know that there are certain things that are unknowable. And that's what we're going to call the smart I don't know. If you ask some sort of sophisticated question about, I skipped over the entire analogy because I don't think it's that relevant and we're starting to run low on time. But just picture in your mind some sort of sophisticated question about the position and momentum of a subatomic particle, etc. You can ask a 7-year-old child if he knows the answer to the question, and the 7-year-old can tell you, I don't know the answer. And then you can ask Stephen Hawking. And you ask Stephen Hawking this sophisticated question in physics, and he also says, I don't know. They're both using the same 3 words. But Stephen Hawking is not saying, I don't know because I haven't applied myself to it. I don't know because I don't care about it, or I don't know because I haven't read enough or learned enough or had the right teachers, etc. He's saying, I don't know because I believe it's inherently unknowable. There are certain questions within physics that actually the very rules of physics tell you there's no way you're ever going to be able to know the exact answer to this particular question. That's the point we're trying to make. And that's the point I want you to observe in text 10. I think we're back at Ron. If you can read for us on page 15, we're back to Maimonides from the Guide for the Perplexed. Go ahead, Ron, when you're ready, text 10.
Okay. You must consider when reading this treatise that mental perception is subject to conditions similar to those to which physical perception is subject. That is to say, if your eye looks around, you can perceive all that is within the range of your vision. If, however, you overstrain your eye, exerting it too much by attempting to see an object which is too distant from your eye, or to examine writings or engravings too small for your sight, and forcing it to obtain a correct perception of them, you will not only weaken your sight with regard to that special object, but also for those things which you otherwise are able to perceive. Your eye will have become too weak to perceive what you were able to see before you exerted yourself and exceeded the limits of your vision. Respecting this, it has been said, have you found honey? Eat so much as is sufficient for you, lest you be filled with it and vomit it. How excellent is this simile! In comparing knowledge to food, the author of Proverbs mentions the sweetest food, namely honey, which has the further property of irritating the stomach and of causing sickness if one consumes too much of it. He thus fully describes the nature of knowledge. Though great, excellent, noble, and perfect, it is injurious if not kept within bounds or not guarded properly. It is like honey, which gives nourishment and is pleasant when eaten in moderation, but is totally thrown away when eaten immoderately. It was not the object of the prophets and our sages in these utterances to close the gate of investigation entirely, and to prevent the mind from comprehending what is within its reach, as is imagined by simple and idle people, whom it suits better to put forth their ignorance and incapacity as wisdom and perfection. The whole object of the prophets and the sages was to make it known that the intellects of human beings have a limit at which they stop.
Okay. All of this is just a sophisticated way of getting us to the point of understanding that we should resist the temptation to say, I know, I have an answer. There's a way to explain this. As much as our very DNA wants us to do that. That's the point. So to return to our question, and to finish off with point number 4, if we're not going to try to make sense of it and give it an answer, what we're really trying to understand is to reach a real and acceptance place, perspective, a place of acceptance, not of the tragedy, of us being unable to wrap our brains around it. We're trying to become comfortable with not knowing. We're trying to become comfortable with living in a state of protest to a certain existence. We don't like living that way. We don't. We like for everything to make sense. We like for the Tetris blocks to fit in with each other. We like for the second half of the verse from the song to be completed. We like to finish the picture. And sometimes we can't. And that's where we get to this question. When we respond to the suffering of others, and by the way, you see this with regards to, you see this when in the Rebbe's posture, for example. Not even to the Holocaust, for sure with regards to the Holocaust, but even with regards to quote-unquote smaller tragedies. There was something called the Yad HaChamisha, which was a terrorist who climbed into a yeshiva in Kfar Chabad, into a Chabad yeshiva, anyways, and he killed 5 yeshiva students. This is in the 60s. The Rebbe's response to it was Vayidom Aaron, to be silent, not to try to rationalize, eventually the Rebbe came to a position where, okay, this should demand of us to be better people, to bring more goodness into the world, etc. That comes later. But the first thing is to live in protest with it, not to need to explain it, not to need to make sense of it, etc. You see this with people all the time. Somebody dies of a terrible illness, of cancer, of something, whatever it is, at a very young age. And people come, and instead of being empathetic, instead of living in protest with the other person, they try to make sense of it. Did they try this? Did they try that? When did they find out about it? Maybe if I find out more details, maybe if I learn more about it, then I can make sense of it in my brain. Oh, he died because they didn't go to the doctor soon enough. He died. It doesn't make a difference. All of those things notwithstanding, we should be able to live and be comfortable living in protest. It's a strange word, comfortable. We should be comfortable living uncomfortably. That's what I'm trying to say. We should be comfortable living uncomfortably about the Holocaust for the rest of our lives. So in other words, to ask the question, why did the Holocaust happen in God's world, is essentially to say, we cannot comprehend God's ways. We know that already. Because the person started off that way. He started off saying, I believe in God, and I'm never going to be able to understand it, etc. But then, it's not to, this slide is messed up, it's not to accept God's unknowable ways with faith. It is to wrestle with God's unknowable ways of faith. It is to say, Ad Masai. Ad Masai means, until when will there be suffering in this world? Mashiach now. The world needs to reach a state of completion, a state of Mashiach, a state of peace, etc. I am uncomfortable reaching any state of comfort with a question of the suffering of other people. We're not looking for God to come down in a whirlwind and give us a reason, right? I often say that if somebody offered me the opportunity for God himself to come down, and somehow I would know it was God himself, and to explain to me in my brain the answer for why the Holocaust happened, I would refuse. I would say, no, thank you. That's not what I meant by why. What I meant by why wasn't that God should come down and answer the question for me. What I meant by why was, I am uncomfortable with this reality in my life, and I would like to remain uncomfortable with this reality until it no longer is a reality with the coming of Mashiach. This is why, when we encounter suffering, we mimic Abraham. Abraham says, Hashofet kol haaretz lo yasa mishpat. Will the judger of all the land not do justice? That's our response to suffering. We mimic Moses, and we say, really? If this is the world you intend to exist, keep me out of it. I don't want to exist within that world. We demand, and as chutzpahdik as it is, as brazen as it is to say something like this to God, we know that this is exactly what God wants of us. God does not want us to be comfortable with it, right? It's like when a parent turns to a child, and or whatever, is playing a game with a child, and the parent turns up the difficulty level just enough, because parents are always playing. They're never playing at their full level of you play chess with a child, for example, right? You're never playing at your full level. You're playing with a 5-year-old, so you try to play at their level. And then at a certain point, the parent turns it up a little bit, and all of a sudden now they're playing at a very difficult level. And then the child looks at the parent and says, "Oh, you turned up the difficulty? Forget it. I don't want to play. I give up." Is the parent happy about this because they won? No, the exact opposite. The whole reason I turned up the difficulty was because I wanted you to step up to the plate and challenge that difficulty, to meet that challenge. When things like this happen in the world, if we were to say to ourselves, God, you know what? I've become comfortable with it. I'm okay with October 7th happening, with thousands of people losing their lives. You know why? Because I have so much faith in you. Because I have so much faith in you that I accept whatever you did, it must be for a reason. God himself is unhappy with that response. God himself wants us to challenge him. And so we'll conclude with text 11, which I think really drives this point home. Mark Schneider, you want to read for us, please, on page 17?
The religious question is, therefore, not why did this happen, but what then shall we do? That is why, along with our prayers for the injured and the bereaved, we will be asking people to donate money to assist the work of relief. The religious response is not to seek to understand, thereby to accept. We are not God. Instead, we are the people he has called on to be his partners in the work of creation. The only adequate religious response is to say, God, I do not know why this is terrifying disaster has happened, but I do know what you want us to do, want us to help the afflicted, comfort the bereaved, send healing to the injured, and aid those who have lost their livelihoods and homes.
Judaism demands our preoccupation with lessening other people's sufferings. Whenever there's a natural disaster, it is our duty as human beings to help. Judaism does not believe that God brought the disaster, God brought the tragedy, and therefore we should accept it. This applies to everything, right? We don't believe, for example, there are some groups that refuse medical treatment when they're sick. God made you sick. You're going to try and subvert this disease from the person. Judaism's view is starkly opposed to that. And the reason is because we believe that God has created an imperfect world for us to perfect it. Whether we can perfect it completely or whether we can do a little tiny bit in order to make it that much better. And it is the same reason why no matter how big a tragedy happens in this world, whether it was October 7th or whether it was the Pittsburgh shooting or the Poway shooting, you will always get the same email from Chabad rabbis until they're blue in the face. They are fighting with darkness and we will fight with light. They are showing that the world is imperfect and we will continue to insist that we will do our best to perfect it. Because we do not believe that when evil people do something, or even not evil people, even a natural disaster, we don't believe that God sent it in order for us to accept it. We believe that God is turning up the difficulty level for us to respond in kind. So to set the tone for the rest of the course, when we learn about the Holocaust, as we're going to be doing now for 5 more weeks, and we ask the question, how does the Holocaust speak to us today? It is always going to be in a tone of demanding, never seeking acceptance, never seeking comfort. It's going to be based on lesson 1, that we are comfortable being uncomfortable. We are aware that we live in a world where the world is not perfect, and we do not give God a pass on that, and we will continue to fight him on it. At every stage of the way, to continue to light a candle and another candle and light and more light to finally bring about the coming of Mashiach. And it's the reason why Mashiach is described as it is in text 12. Mickey, can you bring it home for us, please? On page 18.
He has concealed death forever, and the Lord God shall wipe the tears off every face, and the shame of his people he shall remove from upon the entire earth. For the Lord has spoken.
The time of Mashiach is described by the prophet Isaiah as a time when tears will be wiped off every face and death will be eradicated forever, when there will no longer be pain and suffering. And so long as there is air in our lungs, as Jews, we are called upon to view every tragedy as a call to make the world a better place, to bring about the time of Mashiach, to bring about a time of serenity, to bring about a time of life, of light and life, when death and tragedy and pain and suffering of others will no longer be a reality. With this, we'll conclude our first lesson of Beyond Never Again, Wrestling with God.
Wow.
Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
I look forward to seeing you all next week for lesson 2, which is titled The Voice of Your Brother's Blood.
Thank you, Reverend Dushi. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Here, Rabbi.